Greetings merchants, I'm Halcylion and it would appear that I have to make another trade guide for Bannerlord because the most recent patch has introduced a few changes that made it harder for us to practice our profession. I am a bit torn when it comes to this update and especially beta 1.5.5. On one hand, trading's been nerfed again and smithing is still overpowered, but on the other, I quite enjoy many of the changes introduced to the Calradian commercial system. No matter how I feel about these updates, I appreciate the fact that Tailworlds is working hard to improve their game. Before we begin, it has to be mentioned that today I will most likely not teach you any new trading tactics. I've done that all throughout my previous tutorials and I do not wish to unnecessarily extend today's video by reiterating talking points I've already made. My goals today are to discuss the latest changes that will affect your merchant experience and how to overcome these nerfs by using the right tactics at the right time. Last but not least, I would like to create a roadmap to help you on your journey. And finally, a short disclaimer: if watching this video makes you feel like a fish on land and you don't understand any of the concepts I talk about, that is because you haven't watched my previous guides. For your convenience, they've been placed in the description, so it's best you check them out before proceeding with today's tutorial. The very first thing we need to do is answer the following question. Why do we bother trading in Bannerlord? There's many reasons for trading. It's a decent way of making money if we try to play the game without exploiting the highly unbalanced weapon crafting system. It teaches us about the map and the global economy, and in a way, it's fun to see the numbers go up. But none of those reasons apply. The correct answer is, we trade to level up our skill and unlock the final perk named Everything Has a Price. My corporate reports playthrough showcased just how powerful this perk can be, and now that it's been moved to level 300 of trade, it's going to be a bit difficult to unlock. But not impossible if you max out your social attribute. Now, the perk being moved to the absolute end of the trading skill tree wouldn't be such a problem if caravans worked as advertised and generated some passive experience points, but that is currently not the case. So we're forced to grind this skill manually. This was the first massive change introduced in patch 1.5.4. The second is a nerf to party mobility, which affects merchants more than any other playstyle in this game, so let me explain why. Initially, I was planning to have an in-depth analysis about party mobility, but I'm pretty sure by now most of you already know these mechanics. For those who don't, I'll try to keep it brief. This is your movement speed and it can be affected by many things. Terrain, party size, the weight of your cargo, and the type of units you have in your army. In regards to that last factor, foot soldiers are the slowest, but if you buy mounts for them, they'll move a bit faster. And if you strictly hire horsemen, the mounted infantry speed bonus will be replaced by the cavalry buff, which is twice as strong. This doesn't have much to do with the change itself, but we need to talk about how to increase your speed, because the new patch will make you slower due to the fact that the herd penalty has been increased. So let me give a quick rundown to this herd penalty thing, in case you don't know what it is. So we've talked about how horses can improve your party's movement speed, but not all horses are meant to be mounted. Work horses do nothing to improve your speed, but they act as pack animals and offer increased carry capacity. Thing is, if you have fewer people than animals, the livestock will get a little out of control and your men will have to spend extra time to round them up and herd them towards your destination. That is what the herd penalty tries to simulate. As for calculating the herd penalty, let me paint a picture for you to make it easier to understand. Let's say your party consists of 50 infantry units. If you add 50 saddle horses, there is no herd penalty, quite the opposite, because your men will mount up and move faster. If you add 50 horses on top of that, there's still no herd penalty because your men can easily control one horse each. But the moment you add one extra animal, you'll see the herd penalty making an appearance. Now, one extra beast won't slow you down too much, especially if you have 50 people, but this herd penalty increases proportionally to the ratio of animals to people in your party. And it's not just horses that contribute to this herd penalty, but all animals. Mules, cows, hogs, sheep. The more of those you buy, the more they'll slow you down, and this herd penalty is especially bad after the 1.5.4 patch. Prior to this update, having a large herd was quite manageable, but now, if you have 20 people and 30 animals, the 10 extra livestock will have a severe impact on your mobility, and that could make you vulnerable to roaming bandit parties. But if you have 100 soldiers and 110 beasts, 10 extra animals don't have the same negative effect due to the fact that you have more people to manage the herd. And I've recently discovered that the herd penalty caps out at -4 movement speed, which can be offset by a dedicated cavalry retinue. But even with cavalry, you will be unable to outrun anything, so you will need a lot of protection if you're carrying a full herd. But yeah, that's pretty much how the herd penalty works, and since this patch it's important to be aware of it. So that's the two big nerfs to the merchant playstyle. Thief trading has been locked behind 300 levels of trade, and you can't manage too many animals. The second change will especially affect you in the early game when trading livestock is damn near impossible. So when you can afford it, I recommend you to assemble an army which consists solely of horsemen, so you may offset the herd penalty and any other movement impairing effects. But until you get to that point, you're gonna have to make some goddamn money. So how do we make money? Well, there's always smithing if you want to break the game's economy, but by the time Bannerlord is out of early access, smithing is gonna be nerfed even harder than trading, so let's explore alternative methods that don't involve sweating at the forge. Hustling is one of the best ways to earn some pocket change in the beginning of the game. If you don't know what this method involves, it's because you haven't watched my expert guide, so what are you still doing here? Anyway, all I can say about hustling is that in the 1.5.5 patch, it's become even more profitable. Early game targeted trading may also make you a bit of money, but it may not be reliable before you have more funds at your disposal, so what else can we do to get some coins? Well, there's always quests. Now, some quests, such as Army of Poachers, Caravan Escort, Caravan Ambush and Clearing Bandit Hideouts, cannot be done early on because you and your soldiers are just a bunch of peasants, so I'd try to avoid those. Other quests, like In and Out or Art of the Deal, are pretty much a waste of time, so don't bother with those either unless you're power leveling your charm skill. The best quests to look for early on are Train Troops for Headmaster, Landlord Needs Laborers, and if you head into a city, keep an eye out for Gang Leader quests, which require you to smuggle in some one-handed axes. It's always axes for some reason. There are several other quests which are pretty good, such as Deliver the Herd or Village Needs Draught Animals, but those are not always great. But you shouldn't bother chasing around after quests. You can actually feel free to do other things, such as trading or chasing looters, and when you pass through a settlement, simply check if there's any useful quests available. And once you've amassed over 20,000 dinars, I suggest you head over to the steppe and start recruiting Khuzait nomads, as well as any horsemen that are available. Avoid hiring footmen or archers because your goal at this point is to build a fast caravan and take trading a bit more seriously. This is a trade guide after all. The next step is to visit stud farms, plenty of those in the east, and purchase large amounts of mounts, which will be used to upgrade your nomads into tribesmen, the cheapest cavalry unit available. The cherry on top is that these tribesmen are horse archers who can outrun and outrange nearly any bandit threat. But if you play your cards right, you won't even need to fight. Well, you will need to fight a little to get your nomads leveled up, but once your party is filled with Khuzait tribesmen, it's time to focus on trading. I will assume that your clan is at least tier 1 by now and you have a total of 50 horsemen, so what you need to do to finalize setting up your trade convoy is to purchase 30 mules. Or other workhorses, I don't care. Why 30 and not 50? Well, that depends on what you want to do. You want to be a goods trader? Buy 50 mules and max out your carry capacity, but say goodbye to profits earned from animals. Hogs, cows, sheep, and even Aserai horses, they'll all slow you down if you herd too many. That's not to say you can't trade animals as well, but if you buy more animals than you have people, take the herd penalty into consideration and make sure you don't slow to a crawl. The gist of it is this: if you want to solely be a goods trader, buy as many mules as you can handle and use the maximized carry capacity to haul wares all over Calradia. If you'd rather be a horse trader, you can forget about the mules and simply purchase cheap desert horses to sell in Prevend, Maronath or Epic Rotea, but you will have to sacrifice the sale of materials and wares, since you can't carry as much. Or you can be a wholesale merchant who trades in whatever brings the most profit, be it wares or livestock, so in this case, you'll need no more than 30 mules, so you may fill their cargo with goods, while also keeping your herd small to allow you to buy cows and Aserai horses without hindering your movement. But you shouldn't care too much about hindering your movement, because if your army consists solely of cavalry, their speed bonus can offset the herd penalty and keep your speed normal, even if you dared to carry more animals than you could effectively manage. And if you're starting to get overburdened, don't worry. You can suffer a small movement penalty until you get to a town that buys all your stuff. All of those numbers, of course, were listed under the assumption that your party has exactly 50 horsemen, but if you can, you should always have as many soldiers as you're able to round up. The larger your party, the more animals you can manage, and the more your caravan will increase, and so will your capacity for global trading. By the way, once you have the Kuzit tribesmen, do not upgrade them into raiders. Their daily wages will double, and that will cut into your bottom line. If you want to maximize your profits, avoid upgrading your soldiers past tier 2 and keep your expenditures low after all. The sole purpose of this cavalry is to move quickly, drive the herds onward, and act as a deterrent for bandits who may be looking at you funny. That is not to say that will be their only job, since you will inevitably branch out into the industry of world conquest, but to do that, you will need the final trade perk, as I keep repeating. So focus on trading until you reach that milestone. Okay, so you formed a caravan with 50 horsemen and you're now ready to seriously start trading. What next? Well, the first step in your merchant's journey is unlocking the first 2 perks so you can more easily keep track of your profits. It's actually pretty quick to get the first 50 levels. And once you do, it's much easier to trade and level up your skill if the prices on these items change color, depending on their profitability. As I repeated several times today, I've already discussed my trade tactics in the previous guides, and I don't feel like needlessly extending this video by explaining those all over again. All I'm gonna do today is tell you how to alternate between these tactics to earn maximum profit and therefore skill points. So now let me give you a roadmap I've used to quickly level up my skill in beta 1.5.5. When I began the game, I went to the nearest city and I sold some of my civilian gear for a bit of extra cash. I then waited for a villager party to wander in town, positioned myself in between the city and their village, and when they returned home, I bought their workhorses, which I slaughtered for meat and hides that I sold in the city for a hefty profit. I then waited for the other 2 villagers and did the same, but this time I kept 10 workhorses. I must mention that I already hired a few recruits, so we could handle the herd. After this I engaged in a little bit of local, targeted trading in between Poros and Zeonica, occasionally passing through Lycaron and its villages to purchase cheap clay, wood and silver to sell back to the first 2 cities. I kept recruiting Imperial volunteers which I would eventually train into tier 2 basic archers. Skipping all miscellaneous details, I kept hustling, trading and doing quests until I got about 20k, after which I made my way to the eastern steppe. Here, I filled my party with Kuzet nomads, and slowly but surely the Imperials were phased out and replaced with Kuzeits. I bought some horses, I fought looters, trained these rookies into tier 2 horse archers, and my caravan was taking shape. From here I continued trading to get the skill to level 50 and unlock the perks that would highlight profitable items. I also continued fighting bandits to get my clan to tier 2, which would allow me to hire more horsemen. Eventually I had 50 horse archers, 30 mules, and I was ready to activate money printer mode, which to be honest, doesn't deserve that name anymore. It's not even a skill point printer, but global trading still serves a purpose. That of gathering intel. So, once you're done setting up your caravan and your skill is at level 50, it's time to put these assets to use and engage in a little bit of global trading. You already know how this is done, but because I'm lazy, I've updated my method to make it use even less brainpower, and I feel it is my obligation to teach you this method. To begin a session of global trading, go to a supply town such as Seonon and purchase whatever is marked with green. Then go to the nearest town and sell whatever is marked with green, but don't buy anything just yet. Close the transaction, get your money and skill points, and then go back to the market and start buying everything marked with green until the color fades. Then go to the next town and the next and repeat these 2 steps endlessly. And try to pass through every single city on the map at least once, after all, that's why it's called global trading. And if you have this perk, you should also visit villages and buy whatever they're selling at a low price, but try not to get scammed. If you see cows being sold for 200 dinars and that price is marked with green, they're lying to you. In patch 1.5.5, you can buy cows for 30 and sell them for 250, but keep in mind that prices may always change, especially as the updates roll along and the game keeps being improved. If you're lazy like I am, you can put on a large playlist and keep doing global trading until your skill is at level 300, but this is a very slow method of developing your skill. The upside is that you don't really need to pay attention to anything, just making sure you buy green and sell green, so you can keep grinding like this if you're so inclined. But while you're acting like Mr. Worldwide, there are several things you need to do if you want to maximize your skill gain. First, keep an eye out for quests, and if you need money and you see an easy opportunity to make some, grab it. Sometimes, escorting a merchant caravan can bring profit in more ways than one. You're primarily paid to guard the caravan, but nobody said anything about the caravan having to be profitable, so you can ride forth into your employer's target town and snatch up his deals. You may even ask the caravan what they're transporting to know for sure. Secondly, I need you to keep an eye on the event log, or look for this icon, or even try to see if there's siege weapons built on top of city walls. Those are 3 indicators that a city is being assaulted, and if any sieges occur in your vicinity, stock up on cheap goods and ride there immediately. I've already explained siege trading in the expert guide, so you know what to do. Siege trading used to be the best way of developing the skill, but right now it is a bit inconsistent and it pales in comparison to well-executed, targeted trading. Which is where my next piece of advice comes in, because the third and most important thing you need to do during your global trading session is grabbing a notepad. What for, you may ask? Well, my friend, in this world, you cannot depend on anyone but yourself, so pay attention. As I've said, global trading isn't a great way of developing your skill, but it is a good way to gather intel, which you will compile inside your trusty notepad. So as you wander the world, if you notice ridiculously low prices for stuff in the cities you pass through, write down the name of the city, the item in question, and its purchase price. But how do we know what to sell over there? Well, you can look for items marked with orange on the trader's side, or you can avoid selling your entire stock. That's vague, isn't it? Let me give you a proper example. Let's say you purchased 300 units of clay for 9 dinars each. It might be tempting to sell all 300 units for 30 dinars if you find that offer, but what I recommend you to do is to sell 299 and keep the last unit of clay to see what price it would fetch in other towns. Who knows, you may come across a town willing to buy it for 40, so next time you plan to trade clay, you'll visit this city instead. It is possible that this new city offers better prices because it was recently under siege, so keep that in mind. Trade prices aren't always consistent. Once you write down a few goods that sell ridiculously low in town A and extremely high in town B, you can cross-reference the info in your ledger to build a solid trade route between these two towns, where you engage in focused trading with a high volume of only one item, or targeted trading with several items. And if you're focused on trading one item between two cities that are further apart from each other, keep that one item for the targeted city, and do some trail trading with other goods in between. And of course, if you want to build your trade routes even faster, you can wait in a town for a couple of days and talk to incoming caravans about their trade routes. And if they have any interesting info, write it down in your ledger. Now I could just tell you, go to Askar, buy horses and sell them in Vlandia, and act like that's the only method of trading, but how do I know if the economy in your game is the same as in mine? Maybe in your save game the Imperials pushed deep into the Aserai territory and Askar's villages keep getting raided, and it has no horses on offer. What do you do then? Blame me for giving you inaccurate information. That's not something I want to be responsible of, which is why I give you an entire system, not just a few tips and tricks. So to recap everything we've said thus far, don't rush into trading early on. First, build some capital through less orthodox methods, build some renown, raise your clan level, create a caravan of about 50 Khuzait horse archers, and then do one session of global trading. As you pass through each city, write down notable offers and use the best ones to build your trade routes. Then simply do targeted and trail trading, and if you spot a siege, go there to make some quick skill points. And when you're capable to put up a fight, don't avoid battles, especially if you run across large and slow bandit parties, as each battle will reward you with renown, loot, and forced labor for the mines. So that's how I've adjusted my trading routine in the new patch. In a nutshell, targeted trading is the best way to get skill points as long as you know what you're doing, and animals will slow you down a lot more. But the end of this guide is in sight, so let me quickly share a few more tips that'll make trading more enjoyable for you. First of all, I am happy to announce that workshops and caravans are no longer steaming piles of shit. I mean, the daily income for some of these is quite terrible, but together they add up to a nice amount, especially if you keep your party wages low. And some of you taught me that if I loot bandits, I can sell that loot to one of my caravans, and its payout will greatly increase for a while, and because I tested that and it works, I felt it's my obligation to pass this knowledge along to those of you who may not be aware of it yet. I guess this has something to do with the value of the items carried by the caravan. In the same vein, I recently discovered how to make the most out of your workshops. So I guess I will teach you a new trade tactic after all, but to proceed with this one, you'll have to remember the shop switching procedure I taught you in the expert guide. Shop switching relied on building 3 workshops of the same type in a single town and then getting rid of them, but that's been nerfed for a while because when you sell your workshops, the locals will change the production to suit their needs. But what if we don't sell our workshops? What if, hypothetically, you built 3 breweries in the city of Sanala, which is also known as the grain capital of Calradia? Well then, theoretically, these workshops would compete with one another for raw materials and for clients. But there's already plenty of raw materials here. As for clients, who needs them? I'm my own client because here's what I can do. I can wait a little bit for my workshops to produce lots of beer until its price drops, and then I buy the entire stock, which costs no more than 40 dinars per unit. The bonus is that the money I spend on this beer is given back to me through the workshop's passive income. But because beer is cheap through the Nahasa Desert, I have no buyers here, so I've made use of a neat little tactic I came up with, which I will call hoarding. As the name implies, I purchased all the beer I could and then made my way towards the Kuzeyet steppe, which in my experience is always thirsty for beer. Chaikand was the city that made the highest offer, as the starting price for a keg of beer was 146 dinars, which is nearly 5 times of the buying price, but I did not sell directly to the town, as tempting as it was. I instead patiently waited for a caravan to show up, and when it did, I sold about 100 casks of beer for 101 dinars each. True, I got 45 fewer dinars than what the city would have paid, but keep in mind, cities drop the price depending on their supply. Caravans don't. So I got a total of 9,696 dinars for 96 units of beer, whereas in town, I got 9,100 for 146 units. So in total, this beer sold for nearly 20,000 just in this city. And yes, I kinda scammed that caravan because they were expecting to sell the beer for 146, but I went in and lowered the price to 40. After this, I kept selling my beer through the other Kuzeyet towns, and I've even done an experiment whose result disappointed me. This experiment was selling beer to villages who pay more than the purchase price, and in theory that should have worked because just like caravans, their prices remained constant as I sold my entire stock. But I also wanted to sell to the nearest town for even more money, and I found out that the peasants took the beer I gave them, sold it in town, and lowered the local prices. So in the end, I came to the conclusion that selling to villages isn't worth it if you want maximum profit. Now that we're done with all of those tactics, I also have a few words to say about my perk selection. The first choice is between wholesaler and appraiser. The latter is completely useless for merchants because trade is leveled up by buying stuff and then selling it for profit, and weapons will always sell for less money than what you bought them for. That perk is quite good for raiders who may have spent some time developing their trade skill to level 25, but for us handrubers it's a waste of a perk. The second is a choice between 30% increased carry capacity and paying less money to workshops. Since workshop upkeep is already dirt cheap, the choice is obvious. I'll take the 30% carry capacity. The third perk selection is between caravans and workshops on one level, and to be honest I would pick the workshops, but it's also a choice between getting better prices in villages and having more profit from selling horses. I personally choose villages, but if you want to be a horse trader, you should also develop your steward skill and get this perk. While we're talking about stewardship, this other perk could help increase the carry capacity of your caravans as well, especially if morality is not your forte. The fourth perk is a matter of preference. As for the fifth, I personally choose Artisan Community for its secondary bonus, but if you'd rather maximize your renown gain, go for Great Investor, as you'll always be able to have more caravans than workshops. The sixth once again is a matter of preference, but when you pick perk 7 and 8, make sure they're both focused on the same type of resource. With insurance plans and granary accountant, you'd get better prices when trading food items, so you can further specialize into what you want to trade with this perk selection. I personally chose to be a food trader since they're sold in higher volumes, but materials have greater profit margins, so pick whichever you want. After that, the choice is pointless because some perks are much better than their counterparts, so from here I pick Sword for Barter, which makes my caravans slightly more profitable, Spring of Gold, which increases your daily income depending on how much money you already have, and Trickle Down for some passive relation gained with town merchants every time I trade in their towns. And finally, we have the most powerful ability in the game. Everything has a price. A perk to which I sang praises since the very first version of this game. So if you want to quickly develop your trade level and make lots of money without using exploits, which in my humble opinion is a more enjoyable way of playing this game, I suppose these tips and tricks should be of help. Now, to be honest, in my Trader Stories playthrough I did rely on the overpowered smithing mechanic because otherwise I'd have been forced to make 15 more repetitive episodes and time was running short, but if I were to start a new merchant playthrough on this update, I would avoid smithing and use another strategy. This strategy involves trading until I reach level 300, investing into caravans and workshops, and keeping my expenditures low in order to make as much money as possible from my investments and the Spring of Gold perk. Then I'd put together a warband of archers, use it to take over cities and castles, sell them to various lords for a lot of money, get even more passive income from the 10th perk, and when I'm ready, assemble a kingdom. I then would hire a few vassals, capture more castles, sell these castles to my own vassals or exchange them for their own fief, and slowly but surely dominate the world all over again, retaining ownership over most of the fiefs in the kingdom. Or rather, corporation, as I used to call it throughout my playthrough. Owning the world is by far the most profitable business model in this game. Unfortunately, I won't do all that for a while because I want to play Cyberpunk and there's a lot of work to do with that game if I hope to grow my channel. 12,000 is already a huge number and I'm grateful to each of you who subscribed, but I think we can do even better than that and I feel that taking over Night City is a good thing to do. And if this video was helpful to you, you can invest into this type of content with just the press of a button. Thank you very much for tuning in and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.